Alrighty guys, today we're gonna go over our user accounts again. So I'm gonna go over. Last time we went over a full or just a partial like user authentication. Today I'm gonna go over more in depth a full user account management system inside Django. So what we did last time, we went over how to authenticate usernames and passwords. So basically, just given a username and a password, we're going to ask the database, is this an actual username and password? We're going to retrieve a user object from it. And if it is, then we'll be able to do something like log the person in, send them to a private area in our website. And if it isn't, then we're probably going to redirect them back to like a login page or something. So this code only verifies credentials. By credentials, I mean like a username and password. And there's some extra steps that are going to be needed for like a fully featured user login system. So a full user management system should include a login form, a logout button, some way to get out of being currently logged in, a sign up form. So this is a way to interactively create a user so that a user can themselves create a user password, and a password change form in case your user needs to change their password. So last time we went over how to build a login form, and we used the built-in authentication form that comes with the Django just to make things a bit easier for us. And we did it in a pretty straightforward way, just using a kind of simple form, using this built-in authentication form class. So if we go back, if we go to our code and go to Django templates, make sure we're up to date, do a git pull on Django templates. I have that user models class, which was what we worked on last time. It was the finished product of our project last time. Today, we'll by the end of it, we'll get to this user models too. But let's work from this project and get to this project this time. So I'll cd into user models, and I'll activate my conda environment. Okay, so now we have access to Django. And let's take a little look around at this project. So if I open up, let's say that there's a single login app inside this project. So if I open up, let's say Django templates, user models, login, and I go to urls.py. See how this project is set up. So, it's safe to assume, well, I guess we can check out the other urls.py. If I look at the project urls.py, I'm routing from e/macid to my login app. And my login app has a bunch of URLs like login, private, auth, session. Okay, these are things we worked on last time. And they're URLs that are prefixed with the app name login for whenever we use a URL inside of our Django templates. So if I run, if I want to run this, I'll run python manage.py. But before that, I'm going to be using a login system, right? So I'm going to have to use the database. So if I want to run this, the first thing I should do is I should run make migrations on my project. And then run migrate. Okay, so even though we haven't created any of our own models in this project, because we're using the user model, as you'll see if I go to my views.py in the login. Okay, we're using my user model, or that user model. So this user here that we get from authenticating stuff. So we're gonna need to use the database. So we apply migrations. Now we're also probably gonna want to create a user. So if you guys don't remember, the way we create a user, we did it manually through the shell. So I just went into the shell and I imported from Django.contrib.auth.models. This should be. From here, I imported user. And I did something like user.objects.create_user. User has its own create method, this create_user, and you need to at least specify a username. And so we can make a username like test user and a password. And we'll make a password, very secure password, 1234. Okay, and that creates a user that we can play around with. So now if we run our project, just working off of, so this is the project that we got working last time. So we'll run it from localhost. And if I open this up, e/macid/login, and we go to our login page. You see I'll have this little login page, and this is the sample login form that was given. And you can give it, say, test user, password 1234. Okay. That's okay. Chrome is saving my password. And you'll see it redirects me automatically to my private page where it's able to display my name, test user. Okay. So some of the things that we had going on here in order to be able to do this, we had this login template view. So this just rendered that template that we saw there. So if I go to my code, here's my login template view. And that's where I got the default authentication form. And I sent that to my login.dg.html template. And if I look at this template, which I put inside the apps templates directory, I made a form and I used this auth form that I retrieved from authentication form to render the input fields that I saw there for username and password. Okay, and I had this form perform a post to a specific URL, to login auth view, which if we take a look at that, this auth view went to a specific auth view that I defined in my views.py here, which handled basically retrieving my username and password from the post, okay, and authenticating the user and logging that user in. Okay, so it's one thing to authenticate the user, and then it's another thing to log the user in. Logging the user in was giving us the ability, like I went over last time, to add the user to the current request session. And this allows me to define views, like private view here, that just given a request checks if there's a authenticated user attached to it, and renders then, or only serves things like private HTML or other supposedly private or confidential assets if the user is indeed authenticated. Okay, so something we didn't get to last time was actually logging the user out. So you can imagine the user might not want to stay logged in the entire time. So how would we go about this? So a good place to start would be to put the logout button in, say, one of these areas like private.html that you access once you're logged in. So I could go to private.html, and I could do this a few different ways. One way is I could add a form with a button, and it will be a simple form. I don't really need any input to it. I just need a button. Or I could even just add a href that goes to the right URL. So I'll create a little form with a button. So I'll go to my private. Okay. I'll go to my templates. And I'll go to my private.dg.html. And under where I logged in, I'll put this little form. Okay, and this form will send a post to login logout view. So we're gonna have to add this this URL here. So I'll go to my urls.py and I'll make this path logout. And I'll just call it logout view with the same name I had before, logout view. Okay, making sure this name is the same one that I specified in the template for where to post to. Whoops, that's not private.py. Private.dghtml. Logout underscore view. Okay, and now I'm going to have to create this view here. So I can define a function logout view. And this is going to be a pretty straightforward function. Okay, so the main thing I have to do is I need to import logout, and I can import it from the same place that I imported that login that I got before. So I can go up. So see where I imported login from django.contrib.auth. I could import logout. And then I'm going to log out. Okay. Just giving it the request. Because essentially what I'm doing is I'm attaching the user to the sessions that's held with the request. Okay, that sessions cookie. So it's attached to every request. So I just give it to the request so that it can kind of detach that user from the request. And then once I've logged out a user, you probably want to take them away from the current private page that they had accessed. So probably where you'd want to go is back to the login page, although that's kind of up to you where exactly you want to redirect them. But I'll redirect them back to the login page. So I'll do return, redirect, okay, and I'll give them the URL by name here of my login view. It's login underscore view. Okay. So it's login because my app name is login, colon, login underscore view, because the name of this URL here that I want to bring them back to is login underscore view. Okay, and if I save this, you can see my server seems to be running fine now. And I can go back to my private page and let's reload this. And we'll log in again. I actually don't really need to log in again because I never logged out, but we will. Okay, and you'll see now that I have this logout button, and if I click logout, it'll bring me back to my login page. And you can check that I'm actually logged out by trying to access, let's say, the private page again. And see, it doesn't let me. It just redirects me back. You'll see what happened on the server is I tried to access the private page. It gave me a redirect of 300 and put me back to login and displayed incorrect username or password. Okay, so this is logging out now. Pretty straightforward, okay? It's really just attached like any sort of button. Usually what you'll probably have going on is you'll have on your private page, you'll probably have like a nav bar or something like that, and you'll just put the button inside of the nav bar. And you really don't need to use like a button even. You just need an href or anything to this URL. As long as it's a like clickable link that sends you to this URL, because there's no post content, right? There's nothing, no data inside of the post. You just need to be sent to this URL and it'll log you out. Okay, the next thing we're going to want to be able to do is to create a user sign up form. So you'll want to be able to have users create their own user account. So I showed you how to manually create a user account like from the shell. That's how you yourself could create some users, but you want the user like on your website to be able to create their own account and sign up for an account. So to be able to do this, let's import another default like built-in form, okay, from django.contribute.auth.form. So this will be from the same spot that we imported the auth form. So if we go up, so the same spot where we imported this authentication form, we could import, let's just activate this so I get my autocomplete. We could import user creation form. Okay, and we're going to use this user creation form in largely the same way. It's not going to be very different from how we use the authentication form. It is going to be a little bit different, though, the way I use it. So the way I serve it is basically going to be the same. So I'm going to get the user, an instance, a blank instance of user creation form, and I'm going to give it to a HTML template. So I can actually copy this code. Okay, so I'm getting my user creation form, and I'll do the same sort of thing where I give it a create false, and I'll render that into my view to let somebody know that, like, oh, create failed, sorry, to let them know, like, oh, I tried to create a user, but you screwed up for whatever reason, and I failed to create it, okay? So I'm going to then send this form as create_form to a template signup.djhtml. Okay, and this signup.djhtml, I can make it look quite similar to my login.djhtml. So what I'm actually going to do is I'll quit the server here for a second. I'll go to my templates. So not that one. I'll go to my templates directory inside of my app where I have my login.djhtml, and I'll make a copy of it to signup.djhtml. And I'll give that an open. Okay, and we'll just change this a little bit to make our sign up page. So I'll make this a capital U. Sign up page. Okay, so the basic differences in our form, we're going to have to post to a different spot now. I'll go here and I'll change, first I'll change the ID just in case we need to reference it, and I'll make it like create form or something like that, whatever I want. Okay, and when we do a post, instead of posting to auth view, we'll post to create view, and we'll make that in a second. We haven't made that yet, but just keep in mind this is where we're going to be posting to. So we need to create this URL, and we need to create the corresponding view to handle the user credentials that we create. Okay, and then we'll use the CSRF token like we need to always, and instead of auth form, we called it create form now. So let's replace that. Okay, create form, and instead of failed, we have create failed. And we'll change this to something like, instead of incorrect, unable to create. Okay, so this is basically the same sort of thing that I did before with the login form. Okay, just slight differences, just changing the ad hoc things about it, like which URL I'm posting to, what the create form is that I'm rendering. Okay, just minute differences, but same basic template. Okay, and now we're gonna have to define that view for actually taking these credentials that we'll create with this user sign up form and processing them. So before we get to that, first thing we'll do is we'll go to our urls.py, go to login. What's going on here? Go to login, urls.py. Okay. And what do we call it? We called it create_view. So we need a URL with the name create_view. Okay. So I'll copy this and we'll put this as @create. Preview. Create. Okay. So create_view will go to views create_view. So in our views.py, we'll define create_view, create a request. Okay, and here's basically what we're going to do. We're going to get, so this is going to be, once again, very similar to how we logged in the user. We're going to get the, we're going to use the user creation form, okay, this model form class, to authenticate the post. So we're going to get, so this is similar, actually it's not similar to how we did it with the authentication form, but it's similar to how I showed you how to use forms, these model form classes that we went over last time. So we use the form, the model form class, to authenticate the post, to check if it is valid. Okay? So, here, I'll take this code and copy it in. I called it user create view here, and I just called it create view here. It's not a big deal. Okay. Let's get all the tabbing right. And wait, this tabbing needs to be here. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're expecting a post. We'll get the user creation form. We'll give it the post data. And then we'll use this form to check if the data is valid. Okay, if it's a valid user creation. If it isn't a valid user creation, then all of this is going to fail here. And we'll go to session, we'll set create failed here. And we'll go back to our sign up view here. Okay. And I'm just realizing I never created the sign up view template here inside of our URL. So let's do that right now. So we're going to have sign up, and we're going to want this to be called sign up view because this is how I'm using it here, or sign up template view. And it'll be called sign up view because that's how I'm using it here. Okay, so now that we have that URL, we'll we'll check if it's a valid user. Okay, if somebody put in a valid username and password, and if it is, what we'll do is we'll actually use the form to create the user. So usually we use, like I showed you before, the user.create method manually. What we can actually do is this form, this user creation form, has a built-in method for creating and saving a user. All you have to do is form.save, and this creates and saves user object for you. Okay? And then once we did that, like let's say we want to do some stuff with our username and password, we could get it from the cleaned data. So just like I showed you last time, this cleaned data, after you check if the form is valid, this cleaned data variable is available as a dictionary, and you get the username and password for it, and we can log in the user now. So generally, after you create a user, the thing you'll want to do is you'll log in the user, you'll authenticate and log in the user, and we'll redirect to a private view. Okay, so now we should be able to try this out. So how are we going to try this out? So we could go to sign up here, and that'll be our sign up view. It should redirect us. It should render this template for us. The sign up template that we created. Okay, so let's go back. Blah, blah. okay, to where our manage.py is, and we'll run the server. Okay, and it looks like we made no errors. Server is running just fine. And so we'll go to e/macid/signup. Okay, and this is the default form that it gives us. It's not very pretty. You could add a CSS file that goes out of your way to make it better looking, but we'll leave it at this for now. I'll show you by the end of the tutorial how to kind of extend these forms with CSS to make them look better. But this default form, it does give us a few things. Okay, so by default, it gives us a way to enter in a username. So we'll enter in something like test user 2. Okay, and you'll notice that it actually limits it to 150 characters, letters, and digits, and these characters only. And then it asks us for a password, and this time we can't actually use 1234 as our password. It's actually going to constrain us. So if let's say I try and do 1234 again, I do 1234. It's also going to constrain that we enter in the same password twice, and I submit. It'll give me an unable to create user. It actually doesn't let me because I didn't meet these standards. So when I'm using the built-in user creation form, it's going to, when I do this form is valid here, it's going to verify that it meets these standards for user creation, which is pretty nice to have a built-in thing for that. So I could do something like test user 2. And I'll make a better password. So I'll make it something that fits this standard. I'll go with something else as the password. Okay, and then that worked, and it automatically sent it to our private page. So now we're logged in as user 2. Okay, so now we have a way for the user to create a user. A new user account on their own. The next thing we need is a password change form. So a password change form is going to allow us to change our password at any given point. So this is kind of an important thing. Quite often people will want to change their passwords as a security issue here. So we're again going to use a built-in form for simplicity's sake. We don't actually have to use these built-in forms, but and I hope that you guys can all manage, given what I've taught you so far, to actually recreate these basically on your own. It just saves us a bit of work for now. Okay, so I'll use the built-in form here. So from the same place that I imported the authentication form and the user creation form, I'm going to import password change form. Okay. And I'm also going to require this method here, update session auth hash, okay, from the django.contrib.auth. So this is actually the same place that I'm importing the authentication and login and logout methods, okay. What was it again? There's update session auth hash, okay. And I'm going to now define a view to handle this. And I'm gonna this view I'm going to use in a few different ways. Okay, so I'm gonna use it in a slightly different way that I've been doing the other views. And the other views you could actually use similar to this if you wanted. So in my login view, what I did is I had a specific view for rendering a template, and then that template redirected to another view to actually perform the authorization. And I did the same thing with the signup. I had a view for rendering the signup template, and then that redirected to another view for actually creating the user. And if it failed, it redirected back to the signup template. What I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to create one view, and I'm going to use checking whether or not it's a post request or a get request to switch in between serving the template and serving the and handling the post validation. Okay, so you could do a similar thing with these other views here. So I'm just kind of showing you the two ways you can go about this. The advantage to this way is that you'll actually notice when I tried to log in and I didn't log in properly, I redirected back, and I redirected it without the form input. So like the original thing I entered into the form vanished. Whereas with this view, the original thing I enter into the template won't vanish because I'm actually going to give it back the form that I entered here. Okay, so I'm going to copy this and insert it here. Okay, so let's just go over what's going on here. So the first thing I do is if I try to go to the password change view and I'm not logged in, so remember, I can check if somebody is logged in by doing request.user is authenticated, then I redirect to the login page. So I don't let any of this stuff happen if I'm not logged in. Now, if I make it here, that means I'm logged in. And then I check if the request method is post. So if the request method is post, then I'm going to get the password change form. So just like I was doing with over here, basically. And I have to give it the user and the post data. Okay, so before, with the creation form, I gave it just the post data. So now I have to give it the user and the post data. And then I check if the form is valid, if it's a valid password change. And if it is, just like with my creation view, where I just saved the form to create the user, I can save the form here, okay, to automatically update the user. Okay, so this will automatically update the user with the new user password. Okay. And then I need to do, and this is important, you can't forget this step, I need to do this update session auth hash. Okay. It won't actually, I said here this automatically updates the user, but it doesn't actually update the password without this. Okay, this only just does part of the job. Okay, and then what I choose to do is after I change my password, I redirect you to the login view. I also could have chose to log in the person. I guess they're already logged in, so I also could have just chose to send them back to their private page. In fact, you'd probably want to log out the person and then redirect them to the login view. But I guess this isn't really that necessary. Okay, and then the other option is, if this isn't a post, then I'm assuming that I'm just trying to get the password change template, like I did inside these functions. So if this isn't a post, so basically what I've done here is I've made one view to handle the post from the form and serving the form itself, whereas I was splitting things up before. Okay, so like I said, you could do the same thing with these views. You could, if you wanted to, mash these up together into one. Okay, there's advantages, and you can play around them with yourself to kind of see the advantages between the two. So this kind of nicely modularizes stuff if you break them up into two, but this allows you to more easily just kind of return the same form data inside this if you fail to log in. This makes failing to log in a bit easier to handle. So if this is a get, then I just get the form, okay, and I send it back. And I send the context back with the user, with the logged in user. Okay, and I serve back, I render back the change.dghtml, okay, which only actually happens if I didn't authenticate the post. So this change.dghtml, once again, going to be basically the same thing as the login and create forms. So I'll just copy, once again, I'll just copy the login change.dg.html, and I'll copy that to change.dg.html. Okay. And before I do that, I'll actually create my path to do this. So I'll take this path, and I'll make this change, and this will go to, I call this password change view. Okay, and we'll call this change. Okay, so now we're going to go to, I copied this to change.dg.html. So go to templates, change.dg.html. I'll call this password change page. Okay, and the URL I'm posting to is the same as the template, so it'll just be this change view I gave you before. Okay, and it was change form that I used here. Okay, and we'll get rid of this failed. That is something that I might want to add, but I didn't bother adding it here. So that is an extra thing you might want to put there, but I didn't bother this time. And since I'm giving it the user, I'll actually display it in the header. How about I'll say password change page, and I'll display the username, user.username, so that we know whose password we're changing. Okay, and that should allow us to change our password. So if we want to give this a try, go to our page here, and we should be able to go to change. And right now we're logged in as test user 2, so we should be good. Okay, and it's the same sort of thing as when we tried to create our password. This form makes sure that you use a good password and that you enter in the old password properly. So you can play around with it and check out what happens when you enter in a bad password or not a good one. Yeah, it's actually sent me back here. And I actually didn't enter in an incorrect username or password. I just should have set sessions to failed login to false here. It was just kind of carrying that over. Okay. Okay, so that then gives you all we need to make a standard full user management system. We have a login form, we have a logout, we have a sign up, and we have a password change. Now, you'll notice a lot of those didn't look too good, so we'll get to that in a moment. One other thing I'll mention is this isn't an overly necessary thing, so I'm just going to kind of point out that this exists, but not go too far into it. But a lot of times you're going to want to associate more with a user than the standard built-in user object has. So don't try to extend the user object exactly, but just try to add to it by putting this user using. You can use a models.manager, okay, from the Django models class to it kind of make a user object on top of an old user object. Okay. Now, what you can do is you can actually even forget about this manager thing. I figured I would point it out because basically what it allows you to do is instead of using the standard user object, like just anywhere you would use that, you can now use an object like this and use this built-in create info, and it would automatically create the user for you. But what you could do is you could just create models that reference your other user with a one-to-one field. Okay, so if you ever need to tack on extra information to a user, just create another model and create a one-to-one field with that user, and then tack on whatever extra information you want, like info and stuff like that. Okay, I don't want to talk about this too much because it'll use up too much time, but just a thing to be aware of. Okay, what I did want to go over is making better looking forms. Okay, so you'll notice the forms that I was making for today, they didn't look so great. So probably what you're going to do, like I kind of recommended to you guys to do, is to use other people's kind of templates, CSS templates, to make stuff better looking. So I just wanted to go through an example because you're going to have to do this in your project of like how you do this. So and kind of the different pitfalls that you go about doing this. So W3 schools, they have great examples, so great templates for creating different forms and stuff. So if you go to, I'll open this up in a new window. Okay, so you'll see that there's different templates for creating stuff like a login form and a sign up form. Okay, even a checkout form you got here. You guys can add this stuff as well if you want in your final project. You could see that the login form, it even has some fancy stuff like a modal login form. So a modal login form will pop out in its own window. You give it a try by clicking around here. You go to login and see a window pops up like this. So like let's say you want to integrate this into your project. Okay, instead of just using the built-in form that I showed you, you want to use a form like this. How do you go about doing this, and what are some of the pitfalls? So most of it is just going to be like copy and click and pasting, right? But you're going to run into certain pitfalls. So some of them are replace any source references to assets like images and stuff that are not available. You're going to have to either decide to remove them or replace them. When you have forms, make sure the forms are working the way we need them to work with Django. So you'll look and see, so inside this form, it just has an action here and it has no method. So make sure the method is specified to be post and make sure the action is equal to the right URL. And also, it's a good idea to use a good base template, okay, that allows you to like easily modularize some of this code that you're copying and pasting. Okay, so let's go over an example of doing that right now. So the first thing I would do is start off with a good base template. So I kind of gave you one here. So this is a nicely extensible base template. Okay. So I keep my base templates at the root of my project. So I showed you guys how to do that, remember? You can go to templates and you'll have a base.html. Okay. And you'll notice about this template is, whoops, that's not what I wanted to paste. There we go. I put a block here for adding more CSS links. So in my base template, I have my one standard CSS file, but you can include many different CSS files. Okay, so you can just kind of tack on CSS as you need it. So I put in a block here for adding more CSS templates. Okay, and if I don't specify this block, then that's okay. It'll just add nothing there. And I also put a block here at the end of my body for adding scripts. Okay, so I could also add, if I need to just tack on JavaScript scripts as I need them, I could enter that in, okay? Oh, and we don't want this here. Okay, and now let's try and extend our login page. So let's go to our login. So let's go to login templates, okay? Login.dg.html. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Let's say we want to use this login form. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our CSS and let's dump all of the CSS into a CSS file. And there's gonna be two things going on here. We need this CSS code here and this CSS code here. So make sure you're grabbing all of the CSS code it's giving you. Okay. So where do we put CSS? So we put it in a static directory. And I'll call this like w3login.css. Okay, make the directory if it isn't already there. Okay. So let's copy all of that CSS in. So this is the CSS that's going to make it look stylish. And this is the CSS that's going to allow for that like kind of pop-up modal display. Okay, so we literally just have to just like copy and paste this all in. Okay, we'll just straight up steal all this CSS because W3 Schools gives it away for free. Okay, so now that we have, what did I do here? Okay, now that we have all of our CSS, we'll go to, so I called that W3 Schools login.css. We'll go to templates here. Okay, and we're going to want to, in our login template, so if you look at our base template, so now I have a block for adding CSS links. So I'll go to my top here, and I'll extend my block CSS links. Okay, and I can do it the same way. I have this style sheet here. Okay, I called this W3 School logins, or just login, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just login. Okay, and then we'll end block. Okay, so now we have access to all that CSS. And now what we're going to want to do is steal the HTML content. I'm saying stealing here, but it's given away for free. So we'll take this HTML content. Okay, and we'll use it to replace our current form. So I'll take this current form and let's replace it. Okay. Now, we're going to have to make sure this form works the way we want it to work. So this is going to be, the first thing we're going to do is notice the form class. It doesn't have a method here. So we have to make sure it's going to post. And we're going to make sure it posts to the right spot. So remember where we want it to post to. We want it to post to URL. Whoops. Okay, we want it to post to URL login underscore view. Okay, you can double check. That's where we wanted it to post by going to our user models. Sorry, login urls.py. Okay. Oh, and we actually didn't want to post to login view. We want to post to auth view. I almost forgot. Auth view. Okay. Now there's also this image here. Let's say we want to include the image. Just go to the site. Now we might want to replace it with a different image. Okay, but let's just take their image. Image avatar 2. Okay. And well, then we would have to copy it into static file. I'm actually just going to delete it just because we're running out of time here. Okay, but we could easily just copy that image. We could just save it and copy it into our static directory, and then it would work. All right, but I'll just delete that image. Now, the other thing that I actually forgot to mention is you have to check the input types. So if you look at our views.py, auth view is going to assume that it's getting posts from username and password. So we're going to have to check the name of our inputs. So the input for username is right now called uname. That won't do. We need it to be called username. The input for our password is PSW. Oh, that also won't do. Okay, that'll be much better. And then we also have this other input, remember. We could make use of this, like we could define here remember equals request dot post remember. And generally what remember is going to do is it's going to keep the user logged in. So you would have to kind of save this to the database and use some other session functionality to make sure this user is remembered. We won't go through that right now. I bet you guys can figure that out if you really wanted to. Okay, so now we have all of this content here. And the other thing that this mentions how to do is to add a little bit of JavaScript so that if you click off of the user ID or the modal form, it'll exit out automatically. So I could take this script here, and remember inside of my base template, if I go to it, base.dghtml, I added a spot to put scripts. So now at the bottom here, I could be like block script. So I could add these scripts on the fly. And I would probably want to put this script in its own file, but we could be hacky for now. Okay, and now I've basically just hacked this this template into my own DG.html template. Okay. And let's do you guys want to give this a try now? We can go to, so do I have the server running? Yes, I do. So now we can go to our login page again. So let's refresh. Oh, and I made a common error. So if you get this error, this static, okay, expected unblock, is because I forgot to load static. I forgot to put the load static directive. Okay, so in any template, even though I did it in my base template, in any child template, you need to load static before you try and use a static reference. Let's go back and let's try this again. Okay, so now we have a login page with a login button. So you'll see that this page, it has a button. So you could change this button around, put this button somewhere different. And then this modal display, because it's class modal, it only gets, you could actually put this div anywhere, this whole div here. You could have put it anywhere in your HTML code. And it only gets displayed by triggering this JavaScript here attached to this button. Okay, so you could actually change this button to anything else with on-click to get a login. So we have this button here, and we click, and we get our login display. And we can use it just like we did before. Oh, and I made another mistake that I forgot here. We need CSRF tokens inside of our form class. So, go to the very beginning of the form, and add CSRF underscore token. Okay. And let's retry that. We'll have to do this again. We'll refresh. Okay, and now it functions just like our login page from before, but it's a much nicer looking kind of login page. And there's a few things that we didn't extend here, like the forgot password here. We could put that to the change password area or something like that. Okay, and with that, we reached the end of our class. Almost. So you're still going to have your final project to do. I'm going to be posting it on Monday. So take care till then, guys.